Section 5 of A Daughter of the Sioux. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Reading by Shirley Anderson. A Daughter of the Sioux by General Charles King. Chapter 5. A Grave Discovery. Only an hour was the Major away from his post. He came back in time for guard mounting and the reports of the officers of the day. He had reason to be on the parade at the assembly of the details, not so much to watch the work of the post adjutant pro tempore, as the effect of the sudden and unlooked for change on certain of the customary spectators. He had swiftly ridden to the camp of the recreant Stabber, and purposely demanded speech with that influential chieftain. There had been the usual attempt on part of the old men left in charge to hoodwink and to temporize, but when sharply told that Stabber, with his warriors, had been seen riding away toward Eagle Butte at 3 in the morning, the sages calmly confessed judgment, but declared they had no other purpose than a hunt for a drove of elk reported seen about the famous Indian race course in the lower hills of the Big Horn. Circling the camp, however, Webb had quickly counted the pony tracks across the still dewy bunch grass of the bench, and found Schreiber's estimate substantially correct. Then, stopping at the lodge of Stabber's uncle, old Spotted Horse, where that superannuated but still sagacious chief was squatted on his blanket and ostentatiously puffing a long Indian pipe, Webb demanded to know what young men remained in the village. Over 100 strong, old men, squaws, and children, they thronged about him, silent, big-eyed, and attentive, Schreiber interpreting as best he could, resorting to the well-known sign language when the crafty Sioux professed ignorance of the meaning of his words. "No young men, all gone," was the positive declaration of the venerable head of the bailiwick, when compelled at last to answer. But Schreiber had studied the pony herd and knew better. Moreover, not more than 6 of their ponies had been led along with the war party that set forth in the early hours of the moonlit morning. Others, both men and mounts, unavoidably left behind, would surely be sent forward at the first possible opportunity, and, much as Webb might wish to turn back to capture the party, well as he might know that other bands were in revolt and Stabber gone to help them, he was powerless under his orders to interfere until by some openly hostile act these laggards of the little band invited his reprisal. The rule of the road, as prescribed by the civil authorities, to which the soldier had sworn obedience, being practically, "Don't defend until you are hit, don't shoot until you are shot." Webb came cantering back, assured that these frowsy, malodorous lodges concealed, perhaps, half a score of fighting men who were a menace to the neighborhood, and who could be counted on to make it more than interesting for any couriers that might have to be sent between the fort and the forces at the front. Calling Schreiber to his side, as, with long, easy stride, their trained mounts went loping swiftly homeward, he gave instructions the veteran heard with kindling eyes. Then, parting from him at the corrals, the commander rode on and dismounted at his quarters, just as the trumpeters were forming on the broad, grassy level of the parade. Even without a band, young Field had managed to make his guard mount a pretty and attractive ceremony. Frayne was a big post and needed a daily guard of 24 men, with the usual quota of non-commissioned officers. Cowboys, herders, miners, prospectors, rustlers, those pirates of the plains, and occasional bands of Indian, Sioux, or Arapaho were forever hovering about its borders in search of supplies, solid or fluid, and rarely averse to the conversion of public property to personal use. Like many a good citizen of well-ordered municipalities within the confines of civilization, they held that what belonged to the government belonged to them, and the fact that some officer would have to pay for whatever they stole, from a horse to a hammer, cut no figure in their deliberations. Frayne had long been a favorite place for fitting out depleted stock, animal, vegetable, or mineral, and there had been time when Webb had found as many as 40 men almost too small a guard, and so gave it to be understood that sentries whose carbines were unlawfully discharged at night, without the formality of preliminary challenge or other intimation of business intentions, would be held blameless, provided they had something to show for their shot. A remarkable feature of the winter's deportation had been that Hay's corral was never molested, although unguarded by the garrison and quite as much exposed as the most remote of the government shops, shanties, or stables. Field mounted his guard, except in cold or stormy weather, in full uniform, and the daily march past in review brought many of the garrison ladies, most of the children, and all of the dogs to the scene. Some of the households breakfasted before, and some just after, guard mounting, but, as a rule, no one sat at the table when almost everybody else was gathered along the westward edge of the broad parade. It was there the plans for the social day were discussed and determined. Rides, drives, hunts or picnics away from the post, dances, dinners, croquet or tennis within the garrison limits. It was the hour when all the girls were out, looking fair and fresh as daisies. Their daughters blithely chatted in little groups, or, as might often be, paced slowly with downcast eyes and mantling cheeks at the side of some young gallant who had no thought for other duty than that of the thrilling moment. And here they were, well nigh a dozen of them, of all ages from 12 to 20, as the major sent his mount to the stables and made quick survey of the scene, and a moment's glance was sufficient to show that among them all there was stir and excitement beyond that which would be caused by so common an incident as the sending forth of a troop on scout. It was the fact that Field had gone, and that young Ross was acting in his place, that set them all to speculating on the cause. One of their number, promenading with Lieutenant Hartley, glanced up at Major Webb as they passed him by, with such a world of mingled question and reproach in her soft blue eyes, that his heart for the moment smote him. He had never seen Esther Dade looking so languid or so wan, yet more of her and for her had he been thinking during the week gone by than of any other girl in or out of the army. To-day, however, there was another he eagerly sought to see, and with something akin to keen disappointment noted that she was not among the strollers along the broad walk or the chatting groups about the steps and gateways. Not once during her brief visit had she as yet missed guard mounting. Now her absence was significant. In the very eyes of the little party hastening towards him, 3 young girls and a brace of subalterns, he read question and cross question, and was thankful to see Hay, the trader, trudging up the walk to join him. So seldom did the old frontiersman enter the quadrangle that people remarked upon his coming, remarked still more when Webb hurried down to meet him. "You're right about the horses, Major," said Hay, mopping a moist and troubled face with a big bandana. "My racer and my best single footer, Dan, were out last night. Dan's saddle cloth was wet, and so was Harney's. Someone outside has got false keys. I'll put new padlocks on at once, but for the life of me I can't think who would play me such a trick. To steal the horses, run 'em off to Rawlins or up the Streetwater or off to the hills, I could understand that. But to borrow them for an hour or two, why, it beats me hollow." And Hay, in deep perplexity, leaned against the low fence and almost imploringly gazed into the major's face. They all leaned on Webb. "Any idea who they were?" asked the commander. "Not the skin of a shadow, 'cept that one man rode shorter stirrups than I do. They forgot to set 'em back. They had my California saddle on Dan, and that light Whitman of mine on Harney." "Sure it was 2 men?" queried Webb, looking straight into the trader's eyes. "What else could it be?" demanded Hay, in no little excitement. "Well, I thought possibly Miss Flower might have been moved to take a moonlit ride. No reason why she shouldn't, you know, and not wishing to disturb you." "Then she would have used her own side saddle. What's she doing with a man's? Besides, she'd have told me." "Oh, you've seen her this morning? I thought perhaps she wasn't up," hazarded Webb. "Up? Why, hang it, she was up at daybreak, hours ago, my wife says. Haven't you seen her? She's over here somewhere." No, Webb had not seen her, and together the 2 men started in search, first to the flagstaff and there at the point of bluff toward the rays. There she stood, gazing up the Platte toward the Indian village through a pair of signal glasses that weighed heavily in her daintily gloved hands. Captain Tracy, a bachelor assistant surgeon, stood faithfully by her side, listening to her lively chatter, with ears that absorbed and eyes that worshipped. "Come away," said Webb. "I have an order on you for Field's currency in your safe." When are you going to try and get your cash to bank?"